れを忘れてなんですけどメールを十数年チェックしないのでテレポーターでサボっちゃったっていうやつ。
あ、すみません。ちょっとテストここでしようと思ったら、ついつい。さ
らに目が悪くなってる。
目悪いと。
Test. Ladies and gentlemen, can you take your seats, please? Can you come inside and take your seats, please, so we can get started again?
Okay, thank you. Laser pointer.
So, welcome back to the first panel session. My name is Stephen Ramage. I'm from the GEO Secretariat. I'm responsible for external relations, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of these people, particularly to put together the points for Greg's keynote and for the plenary panel session. So, just the first couple of housekeeping points. We're going to be using Slido. So, for those of you who were at the plenary last year, you'll know what that is. For those of you who weren't there, it's basically a website or something you can get with a browser, and you can go in, and if you just go to slido.com. Sorry, could I have the slides back to the main, the one that has the Slido code on it, please? If you look on, hopefully we'll change the slide back, and you'll see at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a code which is 7079. So all you have to do is enter your code into Slido, and there you can ask questions or make comments, and I will be pushing those directly to the moderator as we go. I also want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to pick up a copy of the GEO Highlights report that's outside. the 2017 to 2018. A lot of work went into that, and there's some really good material in here on what we've achieved over the last 12 months. So, our first keynote on this Earth observations for the Sustainable Development Goals is Greg Scott, who's a former colleague of mine. I've had the pleasure of working with Greg for a number of years. He is the Inter-Regional Advisor at the UN GGIM Secretariat, and he's been there for the last 7 years. UN GGIM is the committee of experts working on global geospatial information management. Prior to working at UN GGIM, Greg worked for Geoscience Australia for 25 years. His role, which is no small task, is assessing where geospatial data and information support the UN process. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Stephen. And I must say it's an absolute privilege to be here and to be able to talk to this topic over the next few minutes, and also with this very distinguished panel that will look at the SDGs and Earth observations. So if I can just get my slides up, please, I will start. Okay, so we're at the wrong end. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So just as Steve mentioned, I'm in the UN GGIM Secretariat, and I'm sure most of you already know about UN GGIM, this Intergovernmental Committee on Global Geospatial Information Management. But I've just put in one slide just to give a bit of background to it. And importantly, it's really about those last 2 dot points, how we develop effective strategies to build geospatial capability and capacity around the world, particularly in developing countries, but also bringing our information and our data and our knowledge and our capabilities to bear, particularly in development and the global development agendas. So that's a bit of the mantra that we have around positioning geospatial information to address global challenges. And a key point to that is that UN GGIM and GEO and the secretariats have had a very, very close alliance and relationship, and we each are observers to each other's plenary meetings each year. And that relationship's been incredibly productive over the last number of years. And if I can give some tangible examples of that, it was through that we got the type of language that we do in the 2030 agenda on the importance of geospatial and Earth observations. And these global mandates are incredibly important. I wanted just to start the talk around, I guess, the paradigm of where we are today with the type of information and data that we have. I'm framing it around a famous quote that was made by Nancy Toster many, many years ago. But everything that does happen happens somewhere, and we're in a position today where we are able to just about measure and monitor, if we had the right tools and the right data, how we view and locate and record and collect and analyse and model and monitor what happens where, how, why and when. And another important attribute to that is that the new data and technologies, the methods, tools and platforms that are now being developed enable us to do this more today than we've ever done before. And as you know better than most, this is really only the starting point for what we'll be able to do tomorrow. So it's really important for us in terms of framing, before we get to the SDGs, the importance of what we're able to do with data, the sources of data we now have, and they are growing exponentially. A second point to that, and I really want you to focus, I guess, on the middle and the right quotes here, is the fact that we are in a very transformative and disruptive time when we think about the new technologies, the new buzzwords, the new capabilities, the new innovations that are driving our world at the moment, both in Earth observations and geospatial and location-based information more broadly. It's growing at a very rapid rate, and we cannot keep up. We know that, but then should we be keeping up, or how do we work with partners in doing that, particularly across our global community, including industry, is incredibly important. Data is going to be that primary information source and will always remain that currency in amongst all of this disruptive technology. But what we are seeing now when we talk about data and technology, it's very difficult to separate the two. Even though they are different, they are intrinsically linked together. You may have data, but you need technology to use it, to model it, analyse it, visualise it, etc. So they are becoming more closely coupled as we move forward into the future. And from our perspective, when we're seeing all the countries around the world, that's really challenging the norm of our national agencies, our national governments, and how we actually look at this science, policy, technology nexus when we think about policy making and decision making. So this is really compounding the change we have, but at the same time providing considerable opportunity on how we use enabling technologies and how we use our new data sources when we think about the development agendas. So let me get to the crux of that around the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. By way of overview, as all of us know, is that it's really a declaration as an integrated plan of action. So on the left-hand side, you can sort of see the 4 pillars that sit around the 2030 agenda. And where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is in the 17 goals. But what I also want to importantly mention is that the 2030 agenda, as the overarching global policy framework, captures and leverages off all other development agendas, including particularly the Sendai framework, the Climate Change Agreement, the New Urban Agenda, the Samoa Pathway on SIDS, the Oceans Agreement, and the Financing for Development Agreement. So the 2030 Agenda is the pillar for many others, and this is why it's particularly important when we think about, in the GEO context, where Earth observations can play a major role, particularly in these 3 pillars of all of those development agendas. But it's also very much now about data. So if we think about that overarching integrated plan of action, those 4 pieces at the end of the day come down to data. And I would argue that any way that we can implement SDGs at the local level will be suboptimal if we do not leverage the available data and information and technologies that can support the integration of particularly statistics, Earth observation and geospatial information, because they're the key criteria of data inputs into the 17 goals, the 169 targets, and the 232 indicators that we presently have. And that implementation has to be built on a foundation of good data. When we think about the data itself, it is a complex beast. And I say that because the 2030 Agenda has put requirements on countries to harness the power of data. And in fact, when it talks about the areas of our world, Earth observations and geospatial information, it even puts there explicitly pressure on us that by 2020 we are able to actually target towards developing countries and the least developed countries to significantly increase the availability of high quality, timely, reliable data. That's a fundamental underpinning requirement in the 2030 Agenda, and those that have read it will know that it's through that whole document. But what it also says, we need to think about disaggregation. So it's no longer just national reporting or national data on people, it's disaggregation by different metrics, including gender and age and race and ethnicity, but also geographic location. So it's bringing the where element into how we measure and monitor. So it's not only what is the rate of progress or not, where is that rate of progress, and where are the hotspots or the deficiencies, or where should we target interventions. And so that's really changed the mindset, particularly of the community that was measuring and monitoring, for example, the Millennium Development Goals. in the statistical community, having the where is a much more complicated task. And so that really does change some of these elements. And as I mentioned, we really need integrated information systems to do this. And this is a new acronym that we've been sort of just talking about in the last 48 hours or so. So this is it today, is that we need to think about the idea of GEO-XV, the Earth observations, as the primary source of information from global to local, into geospatial information as integrated data, and how we bring in the statistical processes to measure and monitor across that global indicator framework. And that's going to be vitally important. So let me just talk a little bit about that. And this is a data need requirement that's actually come from the Statistical Commission, the statistical community, and another acronym, the Interagency Expert Group on the SDGs that develop the indicators. So they understand the need for timely, quality, accessible data. Their view or lens is through a statistical lens, but importantly, it's no different to our lens. If we substituted to include all parts of the statistical system, we could say all parts of the Earth observation system, across geospatial, across environment, etc., etc. And this need about data across a broad range of topics and how we interoperate, we're standards-based, we integrate our systems to harness that real potential of all of our data. And that's a very aspirational and ambitious goal that we have. But the reality is now that 3 years into the development agenda, countries are actually starting to recognise that without data they can't do a lot, because they're seeing that life just does not make things that easy. And by way of example of that, in the countries that have contributed into their national voluntary reviews into the high-level political forum, which a number of you have in this room, you find out very, very quickly the needs on the data to measure and to monitor. We are still working out what to do. I'm going to go back a couple of years, but in essence, each year the General Assembly requires us in UNSD to provide the Sustainable Development Goals report. So this is the annual report of progress. And the Secretary-General said in 2017 that, as we know, the clock's ticking, time is against us, and we need to make progress more quickly to meet some of these objectives. But it also recognises the need for data again, and I won't repeat that, but how we use our data timely, informed decision-making, and ensuring that everyone is counted. In that particular report in 2017, and this is where we do work together in the secretariats, we recognise the importance of Earth observations. So even though we think about statistics and the national statistical systems, it's a recognition that Earth observations and other sensors, along with social media and other sources of data, are going to be incredibly important to actually leverage and grasp hold of. But at the policy level, that's very difficult for folks to still understand what those capabilities are going to look like. And let me give an example of leveraging data. And this is, I've taken this from our colleagues in the Statistics Office of Ireland that used these few slides I'm going to show now for their national review. And it was talking about data and leaving no one behind. And what does that mean? Not just any data, not rubbish, good stuff, stuff that's applicable to the problems at hand. It needs to be trusted and it needs to be comparable. And this is a big challenge across all the countries in the development agenda, is comparability. And we need to be able to digest it to provide insights. Digestible data so we actually know what it's telling us. So a way of looking at it is a normal statistical table might look like this, and I apologise for this very small text, but it's just a bunch of numbers. But where that needs to go into the future is like this, is how we communicate that data and that information, particularly at a policy, ministerial, decision-maker level. What are you saying? What do you mean by this sort of change or that change? When we say, are we making progress on what do we actually mean? So infographics and these sorts of information mechanisms are incredibly important. But that's also now tied into what we do in the EO and geospatial community. It's just that we need to focus that into what those insights are for the countries. And so these are just examples of how, in this case, Ireland is messaged their indicators. And that's certainly something I want to talk about in my next few slides. Just coming back to technology. In the latest report for 2018, the Secretary-General noted that technology makes it possible to pretty much do anything we want in our promise to leave no one behind. That if we have the right leadership, the right resources and commitment to use the tools that we now have available, we can actually make this difference. And I would challenge all of us in this room at the moment, if there's technology that's limiting what we can do, I'm pretty sure if that was the case, and it would be pretty rare, that we have ways of getting around it, given the enormous tasks that are in front of us. And I guess a key point to that is perfection is not really what we're after here. Perfection is sometimes the evil of the good. It's about making sure that it's good enough, because we will never always be there. But we have a development agenda with a clock that's ticking very quickly. So in that guise, or in that process, one of the things that we were looking at within UN-GEO-XV over the last year or two, and also discussing with GEO, is how do we bring geospatial and EO more into this insight and this change, and how can we do that at a country level? How do we actually federate some of this change? And we use data sharing, we use technology, we condition our data within countries so that we can compare and we can report on the SDGs. And I'll talk now on a couple of slides on how we've approached that through the concept of a federated information system for the SDGs. In other words, we just federate our data, we use web services, we use bandwidth, and we let countries drive their own agenda in terms of information. So what we did over the last 2 years, we stood this up as a pilot in early 2017, but the idea of a data hub, an SDG data hub, and that in one respect is what was the UN data that has been reported into on the SDGs, but actually putting a global hub together and working with a number of pilot countries to develop their own national SDG reporting hubs. And the example with Australia, with their concept around the digital earth, is another one of those. But these are basically SDG platforms where countries are building their own networks of information. Now, a key important about this is it's ground up. It's being developed by the countries as they wish to participate in this process. So it's a community to disseminate SDG data in a meaningful way, and being 100% country-owned and country-led. So important parameters around that are things like open data and standards, and being scalable and repeatable and interoperable, and all those things around data processes that are incredibly important. But more importantly, it's really about applying the data to the needs of the countries, to what their fundamental national strategies on development are and how they do that, and particularly focusing on developing countries. So, and really simply, it's the way to build the capability and capacity is not big black boxes, not high technology that's with high overheads, costs, maintenance, etc., etc. It's a very light touch approach. Give us bandwidth, give us internet, have web services, consume, use, produce data, and make it available to our public and to the world. And so it's taking the paradigm of data sharing to information integration and application and solutions and use. So when we say we share data is great, but let's start sharing outcome. And this is the focus of this particular exercise, and where countries are now thinking, I need to report on outcomes. I don't report on data. I need to talk about what our outcomes are and how we measure those. And a key point about it is, in this process, which has been driven by the countries, is that they've recognised that it's not just organising or conditioning their data, it's not just building capability and capacity, it's not just providing enabling technology, and it's not just answering real problems, it's actually all of those. And that's been the big game changer, particularly for the developing countries, on how they can actually contribute into this global process and have the opportunity to think about their own development. Just by way of an example, we have at the moment 6, coming up to 9 very shortly, but 6 national hubs online. And they're actually on our UNSD website, and I won't go into these in detail, but you can see they're all very different, they're all very individual, but when you dive into them, they all have the same template on the SDGs and the data that they're openly sharing. And along the bottom, what I've indicated is the countries that, in white, that are so far participating in this research exercise, this experiment that we're developing, and the yellow ones represent the countries that are quickly coming online for this. And importantly, what I did do was underline the least developed countries that are in this. So when you think about the Tanzanias, the Nepal, Rwanda, Uganda, Cambodia, Myanmar, these are least developed countries, and they are bringing this capability on very, very quickly. They need to get their data right. They need to get their institutional arrangements right. But the way that they can make this available now is no longer an impediment. What's important to all of this is that we need more EO. This is at the moment thinking about more people, poverty, population, employment, social well-being, and we're not yet diving into the environmental aspects or the relationships between the human, the social, the economic and the environmental side, and those trade-offs and how we go about some of this. So this is something I would like the GEO Plenary to also think about. My last 2 slides, both I think important. One, as I mentioned at the very start, is that GEO and the GEO Secretariat and GGIM Secretariat are observers into each other's plenaries. But also in each of our annual intergovernmental sessions in August, GEO has a role. They bring in your story to a degree. And I'm just reflecting on 2 of the decisions from August this year that included specifically the group on Earth observations and how they contribute to strengthening. When we say strengthening geospatial information, that's an umbrella of all location-based information. And also how we do that towards the Sustainable Development Agenda, and how institutions such as the Group on Earth Observations can actually help us determine what our future is for many of these countries. And I know you're very, very aware of that. My last slide is, I guess, some pointers for thought and for the future in some of this plenary. Without doubt, the demand for data today is greater than ever before, and that's actually been a requirement of all of our development agendas. We talk about an unprecedented demand for data. But the requirements for EO data in particular, as the source data to frame many of the SDGs from global to local and local to global, is even greater. And I know Stuart mentioned and others that were at GGIM and StatCom Africa just a couple of weeks ago would have heard that loud and clear. People need EO data. But they not only need that data, they need those solutions. They need to think about national implementations and how we put it into the hand of the users, into the hands of the countries. So what's going to be important is how we think about taking our data and our methods and our tools and our platforms into implementation, into reporting, into monitoring, into change analysis. and then into evaluation. But doing it quickly, scaling some of this really, really quickly. And it's a balance of demand, challenge and opportunity. There is significant opportunity, but we know that it's always going to be a resource issue, and particularly in the least developed countries we hear that very, very loud and clear. But GEO potentially has a major role in how we bridge and close some of these gaps. Countries need more access to imagery and EO capabilities, and the question is, how do we best do that? Is it a step-by-step, country-by-country ad hoc approach, or how do we scale and be more concerted given the time that is against us? And I guess if GEO doesn't do this, who does? That's something we need to really seriously think about. And UNGGIM for sure is an incredibly a strong supporter of how we think about the geospatial, as I say, the EO-GI stat process of the development agendas. And we're also hearing that the GEO community, and I know we've already heard this over the last 2 days, is how we increase that leadership and coordination to support the SDGs so that no one is left behind, so that we are country-owned, country-led, we are making sure everyone's counted, and we are ensuring that we do not leave people behind. So with that, I thank you and look forward to a lively panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So thank you very much, Greg. A call to action there, I think, and some big opportunities for GEO to consider. Otake-san has been working at GST since 1984, and more recently as a deputy to the president at the Japan Science and Technology Agency, GST, since 2013, particularly involved in the SDGs and emerging technology. So a nice interface to what Greg's been talking about. Satoru also works as a visiting professor at the Policy Alternative Research Institute of the University of Tokyo, and he is now going to moderate our panel session on Earth observations in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. Over to you, Satoru.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. Yes, for a very too much good introduction. So today I'm going to moderate a session for us, observation and support of the SDGs. So I start. Oh, where is it? How to proceed. Next one. Next slide, please. Yeah, sure. So, as Dr. Greg Scott already introduced that, probably, and also the opening session, most of the co-chairs stated that SDG will be the leading figure for toward the 2030 with the conjunction with Sendai Framework and Paris Agreement. I understand that today and tomorrow we will have other session related to, thank you very much, other session related to Sendai Framework and Paris Agreement. But I have to say, SDG provides very holistic views on global issues, but which means it's complicated. So, and also interlinked each other between among 17 goals. So this is quite difficult, sometimes very abstract. Somebody criticizes it's too big. But so in that sense, we need something to realize SDGs. So I'm working in Japan and also with United Nations regarding SDGs implementation for the time being. And yes, UN report and SDG related people require science, technology, and innovation to play significant roles to achieve the SDGs, which means probably, as Greg said, that for realizing SDG and realizing no one left behind. Probably we need some innovation, which will be possible with some new technology or science. So among SDI, probably one of the base is the Earth observation, I think, because as I mentioned, SDG is complicated, linked to each other, so we need good analysis and we need good evidence that what is going on, going better or going worse. So it needs such kind of data or something in situ. That's quite good, and we need data based upon the fact. So, yes, I learned that Earth observation in support of SDG related to GEO. So GEO summarized the report and as continuing the activity of focusing upon SDG. These 9 goals are just I saw in the report, but probably this is a little modest or moderate to only show these 9 goals. Probably much more possibility, much more relation with other goals, probably, and finally will make everybody happy. So goals 16 should be one of the extreme goal for us, and probably Earth observation can provide something for this. So today's session, we would like to ask panelists what is realized today and what is planning to toward tomorrow. These are probably a lot of examples from the very experienced and sophisticated panelists today. And the important point is what is missing and necessary to the future. That is quite important because regarding SDG, it's up to 2030. It's a little bit in the future, but it's not in the far future. We have only just 10 years and 10 years plus time here. So that we need what is missing and what is necessary is quite important to know toward the realizing SDG. So, and if you have any foresight towards 2030, please let us know. So we have already have a very excellent keynote from Dr. Greg Scott, but also we have a very distinguished panelists from the world. So I'd like to start from Chu Ishida to this direction to have some intervention for this very great theme. So Chu-san, please.
Thank you, Otake-san. I'm one of the 3 co-lead for EO4 SDG. That is GEO's initiative for SDG. And it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's a great honor. And I'd like to thank my colleague, co-lead, Lawrence Friedel of NASA, and also Jimena Juarez, who took over responsibility from Jose Eduardo. And also, I'd like to particularly thank Aji Kavada, who's serving as the executive secretary for this initiative with very active and strong driving force. Okay, I'd like to start with the role of Earth observation in the 2030 agenda. And I think it's very important to define the role of Earth observation in an international agreement. And the 2030 agenda defined the role of data, including Earth observation and geospatial information, in the context of follow-up and the review of SDG progress. Then GEO-Mexico City Declaration affirmed Earth observation support the implementation of 2030 global goals. So from this international agreement and the declaration, we can see a role of Earth observation in 2030 agenda are twofold. One is to to support the implementation of SDGs goals and the targets. And the second is to monitor and review the progress of this implementation through particularly the global indicator framework. This shows a lot of contribution of the observation to SDG targets and indicators. That was made initially by GEO 2 years ago, and they found that observation contribute 1/8 of indicators, but observation can cover almost half of the targets. A similar analysis of a study was made by other organizations and individuals, and currently ESA and CEOs are preparing a more detailed study on the contribution of observation to SDGs. I think this is a very important activities to find out the scope and the depth of observation potential contribution to SDGs, and for planning a strategy how to expand the scope. EO-XV was established 2 years ago with the purpose of organize and realize the potential of observation for advancing the 2030 agenda. It consists of 4 major activities. One is a project, particularly the country pilot project, to demonstrate observation for SDGs. And the second is a capacity building to support the countries to apply observation for SDGs. The third is a data and information product generation for the SDGs. And the fourth is outreach and engagement with stakeholders. EO-XV key emphasis is its federated approach within GEO. And it's coordinate and align GEO's flagship and initiative activities. And also special importance is attached to collaboration with National Statistical Office, line ministries, United Nations custodian agencies. And recently, EO-XV actively participating in IAG SDGs working group on geospatial information task stream, which demonstrate the value of the observation for SDGs with initial focus on 6 indicators. I'd like to introduce key progress in a country pilot project. We have engagement with countries including Senegal, Uganda, Guyana, Kenya, Colombia, Peru, Greece, among others, in demonstrating use of observation for SDGs. And you can hear more afterward. And there's additional country engagement in a collaboration with United Nations agencies like UNEP, covering 6.6.1 indicator for water-related ecosystem change. And it is noted that 6.6.1 and 6.3.2 were successfully upgraded to Tier 2 last March. We had a collaboration with UNCCD by assisting countries to fulfill reporting on 15.3.1, that is land degradation and neutrality. And we have a cooperation with UN Habit in support of countries in monitoring and reporting on 11.3.1, that is land consumption rate over population growth. We have a collaboration with CEOs in providing analysis-ready data, which require minimum data processing by users that mitigate the processing burden for them. And also, CEOs contribute a lot in supporting country development of the data cubes, which include Colombia, Vietnam, and Mexico, and other countries. And also, CEOs is now implementing the African region data cubes. I'd like to highlight of the recent activity of EO-XV engagement. CEO's Observation Handbook on SDG was published last March for the United Nations Statistical 49th session. And GEO and CEOs participate in the United Nations High-Level Political Forum July 2018, and Australia organized a side event, and the GEO and CEOs actively participated. And EU4 SDG have been very active in capacity building, including webinars and training workshop. And we had SDG training workshop at the United Nations GGIM 8 conference. And the EU4 SDG and the UN GGIM America, Mexico CEOs organized two-day workshop for water and land related SDGs. And just last week, we had a SDG event at the United Nations World Data Forum in Dubai. And the EU4 SDG and GPSDD, a global partnership for sustainable development data, had a plenary session there. And I'm very pleased to inform that there's an upcoming EU4 SDG award program. This is an annual award for exemplary use of observation to support SDGs. Just a day before yesterday, we had a EU4 SDG side event, which was quite successful and well attended. We had 3 panel sessions. First one is a sharing of good practice by countries. And the second panel is a report from GEO work program activities and the United Nations organizations. And the third one is a focus on Asia-Pacific region activities. There were key findings. SDG fund very effective, useful for setting a government priorities and national development plan. And the need for the user-friendly data and also guidance development to enable National Statistical Office to mainstream observation into a national statistical process were recognized. But observation is huge in volume and still complex, and there's a challenge of the observation integration with the statistical process. The key requirement is data quality and continuity, and there was a recognition. There are 2 distinct contributions by EU for SDG implementation, as well as indicator reporting. UN SCAP reported they agreed on a regional space application plan for SDGs covering a significant regional program and project. And it is pointed out the challenge is how to operationalize these successful projects into operational undertakings. So in summary, SDG provide a unique opportunity to define the observation for sustainable development. And it is recommended for GEO to further align its work program activities with SDGs and focus on integrate observation in SDG methodology and co-designing user-friendly data and tools and promoting capacity building to assess, monitor, and produce SDG targets and indicators in collaboration with National Statistical Office, line ministries, United Nations, and international organizations. And just 1 week before the plenary, we asked the GEOSEC director to send out the questionnaire to the GEO principal to asking to respond to the questionnaire on the state and the planning of observation used for SDGs. So we request GEO principal to contact their National Security Office to respond to these web questionnaires. And also, I'd like to inform that on a slide function, there's a question function. On the right-hand side, you can see the real-time poll functions, and which carries 3 questions, which are subset of this web questionnaire. I hope that you can respond and contribute to a part of this web questionnaires. Thank you very much for your hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chu-san. I miss to introduce you. He is a co-leader of Earth observation in support of the SDG and from Japanese JAXA. So I like next panelist, Paloma Meradio, sorry, Vice President, National Organization for Environment Mapping and Statistics, Mexico. So you have a floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Members, state delegates, distinguished co-chairs, partners, colleagues, and panelists, it is my pleasure to share with you today the advancements in the implementation of the Mexican geospatial data cube, which will enable the monitor of SDGs indicator through Earth observations. This year, a delegation of INEGI went to Geoscience Australia, which was part of the GEO capacity building and also technology transfer that we very much appreciate for this community, and we thank our partners from Australia for the cooperation. So what is a data cube? A geospatial data cube is basically a massive array of multidimensional rastered data, which allows the handling of the immense volume of data that comes from satellites. The pipeline for this technology can be divided into 3 main stages. Firstly, acquisition and pre-processing, in which the corrected imagery is ingested into the array. Second step would be to perform analysis and pre-processing of this data, which is enabled thanks to the arrangement orderly created during the previous state. When ingesting or indexing the images, and these processes are carried out completely in Python, which also is represents a new capacity building for INEGI. The third and final step is translating results into products that inform the user about specific themes and topics. So what are the main advantages observed for INEGI for the implementation of this technology and the incorporation of DataCube into current processes? First, the minimum analysis unit spatially is a pixel, which allows us to consider more data than before, as previously cloudy images were dismissed. Now 90% of cloud image is still considered, so that the remaining 10% of the data is used. Second, apart from the spatial dimension, the DataCube has ordered the images so that they are comparable in time. And third, this allows time series analysis and change detection by monitoring behaviors in time. Finally, it is possible to orient the monitoring of the indicators for the SDGs, and we can promote sustainable development in our country, as well as share algorithms and progress with other data cubes. So this is an example that is showing vegetation evolution in time in Montes Azules and Marqués de Comillas in the area of Selva Lacandona in southeast Mexico. The first false color images dates from 1986, while the other one is from 2017. The original image is actually the result of a statistical summary from 2017 time series, which is also known as a geomedian. To the right of the river, we can see that the deforestation during these 3 decades has quite a big presence. This analysis regards public policy measurement, since the river Usumacinta acts as a limit for the natural protected area of Montes Azules. Although the example is quite simple, it is very illustrative of the great importance of change monitoring in natural resources throughout our archive files, so that we can better understand our problems and current situation. This next example involves the water observations from space algorithm developed by Geoscience Australia, which was applied to annual geomedian images in the area of Santiago River. in the state of Nayarit. In this example, we can observe the gradual erosion of the coast in the mouth of Santiago River. There's also the possibility to observe the presence of shrimp farms in the area. This example also shows the importance of having a historical image collection for identifying changes in land cover. Here we are observing a proportion of the territory throughout 3 decades. And this third example is crop identification. Oh, sorry. How can I go? Messing up with this. Okay, great. So this third example is crop identification done with machine learning techniques. Using field data from 2015, a supervised random forest classifier was applied to a geomedian image from June to August of the same year. We obtained good results, more so in the polygon of bigger areas, which is why we are currently recreating the example with Sentinel images, which are high resolution in order to obtain the results. The good thing is that we also collect field data, which helps us to train the algorithm. And lastly, let me share an example towards the SDGs. SDG number 15, Life on Land, specifically indicator 15.4.2, mountain green cover. We are doing so by enhancing the process in which we validate FAO's data regarding the mountain's green cover. On the table, we can observe the steps of the current validation process involving this indicator. First, use Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change definition with 6 classes, the land use land cover map. We obtain converted classification. We link a result raster to digital elevation models for mountain areas, and we calculate a green cover index for mountain area mask. And we provide feedback to FAOs. But now, with the data cube, we have some benefits for this process, which include the yearly update of this data by applying machine learning techniques for the classification, as well as a result validation that can be carried out due to the resources saved during the classification, avoiding in great proportion field work. So with this, currently we're in a stage where we're implementing the data cube, and we're revising what kind of information we can calculate with for SDGs. And of course, this kind of technology will enhance and will help to harness the data, as Greg mentioned in his keynote speak, and help Mexico report and monitor SDGs in a more prompt and timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paloma. So next I would like to invite Sasha Alexander, co-lead of GEO land degradation neutrality. So you have a floor for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I think we all know the intrinsic connection between land and humans. Maintaining healthy and productive land is critical for achieving many of the Sustainable Development Goals: food security, water security, livelihoods, poverty, conflict, migration, resilience to climate change. These are all necessary for a sustainable future and a more secure future for us. So how do we monitor land degradation? It's been a very hotly debated topic over the last 40 years, and there are many, many ways to assess the condition of land resources. But I think we've turned a corner, and that's thanks to the assistance of Earth observations and other geospatial techniques. Greater access to large data sets has been important, but having the tools, the practical tools to access and interpret the data has been instrumental from a policy perspective. Here we have a report generated by Trends Earth, one of the tools that we're using that was developed by Conservation International. While not yet real-time and still lacking the resolution that we need, we can get actionable information to decision makers. And at a minimum, we can focus on hotspots and look at areas at risk. So EO is a means to an end, and our end we would like to see is transformational change in the way we manage our land resources. So the land degradation indicator, 15.3.1, is currently one of the few that are actually reporting within the SDG indicator framework using Earth observations. Now, there are a number of other indicators that do have EO in their methodologies. So when we talk about EO, we are still only basically talking about potential and complementarity. So the UNCCD organized 5 regional workshops in March and April of this year. They were attended by 140 countries, and there was a lot of preparation that went into these workshops. Basically about 4 years of work within the Secretariat and collaborating with many of our technical partners around the world. The preparatory work included providing guidance and global default data sets. And this was done in collaboration with partners within the GEO community. So working with Conservation International, we developed a fairly practical and user-friendly tool called Trends Earth, as I mentioned. And this facilitated the integration of not only the default data sets at the global level, but the integration of national data. And this really allowed countries to increase their ownership over the process of reporting on the SDGs, and on this SDG in particular. So we feel we've been very successful in engaging the relevant stakeholders. In addition to our national focal points, we had invited NSOs and geospatial experts to these workshops. To date, we have 145 countries that have submitted their national reports. So every 4 years, we have a UNCCD national reporting process. And so now we've synchronized that with the SDG reporting. So next year in 2019, we'll be able to report for the first time on this indicator. But we still have a lot of work to do. Last year, the UNCCD's governing body invited GEO to consider establishing an initiative to assist with the use of Earth observation. And many of the GEO members and participating organizations have rallied around this. The vision of the GEO-LDN initiative is to connect data providers with data users, provide access and tools for policy and decision making at national and subnational levels. This initiative will build on existing partnerships and leverage past capacity building efforts. This includes synergies with other GEO initiatives. From this experience, we appreciate the importance of practical tools, the need for higher resolution data sets, data quality standards, as well as continuous capacity building until it becomes self-sustaining. Along these lines, we plan for 3 working groups to meet our user demands and to scale up our efforts towards more sustainable land management and a more secure future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sasha. And then I would like to invite, John Chen, co-leader of Geo Land Cover. You have a floor for 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to talk a comprehensive measurement of progress towards SDGs by China at a county level. How to measure and monitor progress towards SDGs? It's a crucial task for national and local governments for implementing 2030 agenda. So as Greg mentioned, United Nations has called upon indicator-based monitoring. They have defined 232 indicators. They will use both geospatial and statistical data, but there are many challenges behind that, like indicators, less or more, data available or reliable, computing, can we take it from geographical angle, assessment, how to translate into actions. So now it demands good practice for promoting the implementation of 2030 agenda and 17 goals. So recently, China has completed a case study at county level. It is in Deqing County. If we look at this one, this is county in Zhejiang province in the eastern part of China. But it's a small county, but very well developed, very rich. It's also the venue of the next coming United Nations World Geospatial Information Congress. So people asked, can we have a comprehensive measurement towards SDGs using both statistical geospatial data, including Earth observation data? So we have analyzed carefully all the 232 indicators of United Nations SDG Global Indicator Framework. So finally, we have chosen 104 indicators. We thought they are suitable for Deqing. It can facilitate international and national comparison, and the data are there. We have the data. If you look at this one, you see for SDG 1, we originally UN indicators, we have 14, but for Deqing, we have 5. Similar things for 15, we have 4 indicators selected. So when we say that some indicators are adopted directly, like 35, some are extended according to local condition, some are revised, 51, and 8 are new proposed or substitute. So with geospatial information, geoinformation, and also Earth observation, we have measured all the 104 indicators. Okay? Among them, 14 are measured with geospatial data and Earth observation, like 4.1, it's basic services provided to local people. We use the geospatial data. And another example is for essential health services. We disaggregated population into 30 meters resolution when we do all the calculation. And another example is for water 6.61. We used the Landsat data and other remote sensing data to calculate the wetland change for last 33 years. Another example is for it's missing. It's 11.3. So we use land cover data and also remote sensing data for last 15 years. So it's the point is 1.25, the indicator. And we did also something for forest change analysis. You can see some changes. Where are the changes? So with all these, we managed to assess every SDG. There are 6 SDGs for the county because they don't have the inland county, they don't have OSIN. So I take one example like that, SDG 6. For instance, these are the quantitative results. These are the ranking results compared to international or national criteria or standards. But what we say is that we try to group the SDG targets into 3 different subgroups with focused analysis, like drinking water and sanitation, with 3 indicators. and water resources with 4 indicators, and water-related ecosystem with more indicators. So the metrics we used include SDG dashboard and also national plan targets. If they don't have it, we use some other metrics like average of the world or national, something like that. So for the ranking, we're using 4 different rankings. First is the first quarter, okay? Second quarter means, the green means it's very good, and the red means very bad. If there are no references, then we'll say no ranking. So then we did a cluster analysis for social, economic, and environment. For instance, we have taken 5 goals for economic growth analysis, and another 5 goals for environmental analysis, 12 goals for social inclusion analysis. It is a little bit different than the cake prepared by Scotland Institute. So now we can tell people how far is the change from SDGs. First, okay, something's wrong with it, sorry for that. We have a preliminary assessment result for each goals, but nevertheless, now we can provide quantitative results for each SDG and also for the cluster of SDGs, economy, environment, and social. We provide also quantitative description. We can tell a story about how the China is implementing SDGs. For instance, one example is that there was a large growth of crested ibis in the area. Before there was nothing, but in the last few years, it has increased largely. Why? Because we can explain that with indicators. For instance, we have indicators that refuse the collection and harmonious treatment is 100%. Good rate of air condition is 97.5. And another indicator is water quality class 2, forest cover rate is 46.1. So in this case, we identify several key challenges for the country. For instance, there is a shortage of public transportation. And we sent clear messages to the local decision makers. They were happy to accept that. They are using them for devising further actions, all pathways. So summaries from this case study, we can say the overall process towards SDGs of an entire administrative area could be measured by combining geospatial and statistical information. Earth observation plays a number of important roles. It's necessary. Some indicators could be derived with remote sensing. Remote sensing data could also provide as evidence for SDG analysis and telling stories. So our future work will be documenting the development methodology, present to the next coming UN Geospatial World Congress. There will be a special session for that, and we are going to carry out key variables-based monitoring, not for all indicators, but key indicators. Analysis of global interactions, because we have 16 SDGs, and also we are planning to have applications in large areas for the whole province, Zhejiang province, or for the whole country, China. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So finally, thank you very much, Chen. Finally, we would like to invite Isabella Teixeira from Brazil. She is a co-chair International Resource Panel, IRP, UNEP. So you have a floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I confess that when I was invited to come here, I was surprised because not as co-chair of the International Resource Panel, but as a former Minister for the Environment in Brazil, and also as a member of high-level panel that proposed SDGs. So I'm guilty. Okay, I do apologize, but you work hard, and I show that I have a lot of work to do because I'm responsible for this. We propose these goals, these targets, indicators, but also I will try here to explain or go into an experience in my country exactly to illustrate how you need to manage the different worlds, science, political worlds, economic worlds, to make sense at the global level, to strengthen multilateral process, and also to bring the future to the present. And I hope that I can measure this better now. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. This is a concrete experience, and in my opinion, really a challenging one. And how we can use data, information, EO data, and also all the economic data to make sense and to move forward, bring together climate change, sustainable development goals, and also sustainable development, national sustainable development strategies. So here is an example. I don't know what's happened probably, but this is an example what we in RIP, International Resource Panel, we are doing now with SDGs. It's only to illustrate we are connecting different goals and looking for how we can express resource efficiency and the impact, and what are the solutions that must be addressed considering this narrative. And I will now explain why I bring this slide for my presentation. Here is the SDG Agenda 2030. First aspect that I'd like to highlight here. When we propose SDGs, we discuss that this is a national narrative for sustainable development. That's not only individual goals. We need to combine, we need to link, we need to tell stories, we need a narrative. This is beyond national plans, okay? It's not only national plans, because on national plans we cannot bring other constituencies sometimes to play together. We are doing what we are discussing, we need to discuss how to bring people together. How we can put in practice the conventions that the legs of Rio 92, how we can go into the future, bring sustainability as a new expression of humanism. These were the motivation that we debate before Rio +20 conference. This was the spirit. This was the reason why we are provoking this new platform, this new framework, because we are looking for this narrative for sustainable development. So we have national narrative, sub-national narrative, and also international narrative. How we can bring everything together, how we can understand this better. So after SDGs, or at the same time, you have Paris Agreement negotiation. And this experience that I illustrate here is exactly how Brazil used Sustainable Development Goals implementation and national implementation or narrative together with Paris Agreement ambition. Our NDC, that, as you know, is the most ambitious NDCs in the world. Okay? You use EO information, as Gilberto Câmara previously showed to us some examples that we have in Brazil, and also data information-oriented assessment and policy reviews. Look, this is very important because you need to go into the different economic constituents and to bring together data and information and build a new platform, a new framework to analysis. In such a way, if it's not possible to do this, it's really difficult to bring other constituents to be part of solutions and also to manage conflict. Political world means manage trade-offs every day, every time. Data availability means to support how we can take decisions considering trade-offs. We are discussing how we can move on considering sustainable development, how we can have economic growth, how we can minimize, how we can reduce inequalities. This is the real world, and I'm so sorry to say that, unfortunately, you don't have natural resources enough today to address sustainable development goals for all the societies. So we cannot use this to increase or to raise inequalities in the world. This is the global political challenge that you have. And today you have food, water, energy, climate, biodiversity, security as key requirement to discuss anything that you'd like to discuss on sustainable development. This means the nature is in transition. Something is not only the nature that you need, but the geopolitical nature is transition. And the world is changing. And we propose this exactly considering these requirements. In Brazil, our experience, as I mentioned before, we are looking forward to bring together the Brazilian DC and land use. So we need to move from, this is the concrete road, how we can move from deforestation to forest restoration and zero deforestation. The legal one, because we have legal requirements for managed natural vegetation. Zero net land use emissions in Brazil. Low carbon agriculture and biodiversity protection, emissions reduction in carbon sinks, degraded areas restored. Why? Because Brazil is supposed to be the most important food producers in the next 10 years at the global level. If you want to address food security, you need to understand who are the players, who will be the players, who will be the countries that must have solutions to address, and how you can use EO data and information to manage it better and to support the decision process. So, for us, in a country that 40 years ago we imported food, and now we are one of the most important food producers, we need to understand how we must use better land use and have food production, not only in our country, but for the global level. And for this, we need also to understand what are the natural and environmental requirements to manage this better in our country. That's why I'm introducing here, unfortunately I don't have much time to say, but you have all the information available with Gilberto, the new Forest Code implementation, the new law, and the tool that we call CAR. It's not a car. It's an rural environmental register and legal compliance. This is the most important tool that you take a photo considering everything that's happening, every farmer in Brazil, and I show the numbers, and you identify not only the past, but also the future, how you can use this better. What are the passive, consider the environmental regulation, the requirements, but also what are the assets that you have considered biodiversity conservation. And the water, we mapped all the spring waters in Brazil. It's unbelievable with data, EO data availability. Everyone. And my country is too big, okay? You have protect areas, performance for both public and private areas in the hotspots. And I'll give the number in the next slides. Look, this is a big picture considering, yes, before Gilberto Câmara mentioned what is the evolution of public policy in Brazil considering land use and EO data use. This is how we manage this in our country. For sustainable development goals, we need to put everything together. We need to have a new framework. We need to have a new political understanding about how we will influence policy-making process and decision-making process. This is not only environment. This is my friend from China will illustrate how we can bring everything together, how we can use not only the static information, but to influence the new dynamics of public policies and policy formulation, and also at the international level. Here you have the CAR, the new Forest Code information. It was developed to have information to act and to react beyond deforestation rates and monitoring biomes. Brazil now has all the biomes in our country being monitored as we have in Amazonia, past and future together, because you have the photo of the past, but you can manage how you want to restore, what you want to restore, how you want to move on into the future. And you have a national strategy for land use. Agriculture as a new political role. It's not only environmental concerns or environmental constituents. Data available, driving force, what are the infrastructure plays an important driving force in a country like Brazil. Because if agriculture demands additional infrastructure, and you go into Amazonia now for this additional infrastructure. So we need to understand how we can use this data and to dialogue with sustainable development goals and sustainable development narrative, pressure, trends, solutions, and new economic political constituents. Who are the key guys or the new guys that must be on board and that will manage this agenda? CAR is an ID of the rural areas. This is a system that we developed in our country based on your data, and it's an X-ray of land use in Brazil, public and private lands. It's a national level to have for all the country, show the past and the present, to add to the future, mandatory for all rural property and use occupation. More than 4 million rural properties, more than 403 million of hectares are mapped in our country. Everyone who produce where and what are the environmental assets, what are the critical regions. So if you want to discuss disaster and vulnerability, you need to aggregate, you need to understand how we can prepare a country to manage better this agenda. If you want to understand the threats from climate change based on a national adaptation agenda, we need to aggregate this data and understand better what are the economic challenges and infrastructure challenges and the requirement for development at subnational level. This is the real road. It's how we will take decision and move on in this agenda. So only to compare, it's almost half of my country was mapped based on these technologies. And you have this today, and you are looking for how agriculture can use this to have a tropical Brazilian agriculture tackling food security at global level, but manage this based on sustainability. The next steps for us, of course, the compliance of the Forest Code. It's a legal requirement. It's a legal framework. Brazil and DCs, we are looking for now, based on this CAR system, how we can map carbon stocks in Brazil, considering land use. No, I don't know any country that has this, okay? Monitoring land use and forest recovery and restoration, end of deforestation, this key political message for us. Also here you have soil degradation management and to understand better how we can restore this. Private public protected areas. You have in Brazil public areas as national parks, national reserves, 113 million of hectares. You have in private lands, 101 million of hectares. So if you want to manage biodiversity in our country, you need to, and we are looking for a new governance where you can have private and public sector together. And this is new, for not only for my country, for another one. The arrangements, the environmental government system, they cannot deal with this at the moment. What are the legal and economic requirements? How you pay for environmental service? How you manage the new concept concerning biodiversity security? How we want to manage water security? There are key questions that you need to manage considering this experience that you have in Brazil. And also decarbonization and carbon neutralization routes for Brazilian agriculture. You can do both. You can do both. You need to change or you need to manage both ones, consider the different regions in our country. So challenges, resource efficiency, how we can go into this agenda and manage better food security, land use in Brazil, with having economic growth and decoupling the environmental impact and social impact. Agriculture mobile frontier. Brazil, we can expand our agriculture without provoking new deforestation. So no deforestation, again, with water security, biodiversity ecosystem service. Sustainable Development Goals support the national mitigation and adaptation agenda. This is an important link between climate change and sustainability. And also the EO data information for the next steps for Paris Agreement implementation. We need to raise ambition for Paris implementation. And it's absolutely strategic that we can address Sustainable Development Goals as a key tool to support countries to raise ambition based on the new information and also new process for decision making. And also, always remember, you need to address conflicts. If you don't have information to address conflicts, I'm so sorry, indicators, they are not enough. We need to manage better process, and information is powerful if we can bring solutions managing process. Not only having pictures or want to have some global data that they are very important, but not necessarily you can use at the national level. So free data availability is key for developing economies to move on. And so this is, I try to summarize here because I don't have much time, but thank you very much for the opportunity to come and stay with you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. We have only probably less than 30 minutes left because this is the SDG-related session, and SDG 1 is no hunger. So I do not want every participant to have to lose the chance to eat lunch. So allow me to close the session within 25 minutes. But before that, I'd like to ask yes, the Secretary to reflect the questionnaire related to information. Would you be so kind? Slide.com. Yes, if you join at slide.com, slide.o.com, and you have 3 questions and questionnaires, and also 3 questionnaires for the polls, and free space to ask questions. So before entering into the question session, but I would like to, in advance, to announce the panelists that the final moment I would like everybody one word or one phrase which is necessary for the future. What is missing? What is necessary? But not referring just money. Money is always the anonymous thing for everybody, but please let us know later what is necessary. Alliance, or the human capacity, or qualified data, or the way of collecting data. But this is final moment for the Secretary to summarize the recommendation. But first of all, I would like to just take some questions on the slide.com. Of course, there is a lot of things here, but yes, I would like to choose one first. Yes, that question. Yes. Here it is. Would you be so kind to have, yes, what is it? Yes, first one is a very specific question that regarding data cube. You can see big centralized data storage needed, or is it possible to get the same result from the web service platform? So regarding data cube, please, Paloma, to answer the question.
Hello. Can you hear me well? Yes. Okay. So I think some of you participated in some of the side events that took place on Monday and Tuesday about data queues, where we talked a little bit more about what is going on around the world and how well, I mean, how many countries are participating in this initiative, how many have said that they're interested in having one data cube, and specifically that there is this data cube initiative for Africa, which will enable the entire region to have a data cube. So first, to this question, I would say that this technology, what it's looking for is to put available data for processing easier and of course habilitating interoperability. And I think something that is crucial here is that we need to work on how to integrate and how we can do this in a more efficient manner. And for this, we're also starting to talk about Latin America data cube, because we really would like, I mean, if you're already doing it for one country, it doesn't make sense to have different data cubes for each country if you can have it all in one. But of course, we have a lot of challenges in terms of infrastructure and resources. I know that that's not the only answer that you want to get, but it's something that we really need to consider in terms of how we adjust and how we adapt. So I would say that, I mean, that's a summary in the stage of what we are in at right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Probably, yes, is there any other people to comment? No, for the time being. So I'd like to, yes, then come down to the second question. Yes, would you be so kind to reflect, yes, questions? Yes, it's too small to see, but in some countries, lack of the SDGs compatible indicator data means relying on proxy data, an issue for comparability, as indicated by Dr. Greg Scott. How to address? Is anybody respond this kind of question? Yes. Where is that? Yes, it
May
should
I?
be
Sorry.
Carolina Adler's Swiss delegation question.
Okay, I'm not a specialist on this, okay, but I can use my experience and also the experience of my country, a developing country. You don't have all the indicators, the data available, and it's very important that you can have a process and a strategy. You need to understand that it's a work in progress. SDGs implementation means a work in process. It's a narrative, it's a story, how you want to be part of the solutions in the in the world, not part of the problems at the last century. So I think that if you have a process, it's absolutely important that you can strengthen the capacity building strategy that this country has, and bring the guys on board, as we illustrate here, to have different initiatives of soil degradations. I'll give a concrete example. Food security is absolutely important for the world and the other ones. Sustainable production and consumption also. Water security also. If you bring it with this narrative into the UNSCCD, the Convention, and also soil degradation, is a new constituency of countries that are responsible for food production. Probably you highlight the common understanding what are the challenges of that SDGs brings for us, and also climate change. And you stress also the multilateral process, and you can understand what would be the new strategy to access technologies and to fulfill, to manage better the handicaps that these countries have. What you cannot do is leave people behind. So that's why the narratives are so important. That's why it's so important to understand that you have a process. That's why it's so important that you can have alliance and partnerships. And also what is the role of the science as a bridge to bring people together. This is a powerful political message, and of course you cannot solve all the problems in short-term perspective, but you can go in the right direction together. And this is, I think, that's when you debate SDGs, I remember that you have a huge debate behind the scenes, consider how you can manage better, including data, lack of data, and lack of technologies. So you need shortcuts, and shortcuts is important that you can bring people together.
Okay. Yes, additional comment? Yes, please.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, the question is that some indicators defined by United Nations for a global framework might not apply correctly to the local level. For instance, for a property, there is no property in the 13 countries. In that case, we try to use some other index for social security, like how many people join medical care, something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Is there any additional comment? No? Please.
Okay, just to add to that, it's not only about like comparability across countries, but also how we disaggregate data. So, for example, we've been talking a lot with Jen about how to disaggregate data in terms of what we report. And this is also something that we haven't figured out now, and we're working on giving some guidance to countries on how to report SDGs and what level of disaggregation they should have. So, I mean, it's not just about the lack of data, but also once we have the data, how we should present it. And in this is where we're working on in terms of how to disaggregate and make it comparable across countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I think comparability is sometimes comparativity to what? In some indicator, probably comparative of the what was done in past. But in case of, for example, carbon dioxide emission, probably it's a comparative data analysis between the region or so is important. So it depends on. And in addition to that, I have to say, SDGs itself quite it's yes, summarized with global general needs. So some of the SDGs are not quite well fit to the individual country. Like for Japan, we are facing so-called population decrease and also the quick aging. But for the time being, quick aging is not common to the world for the time being. Population growth is the problem. Probably China facing the same problem within 30 years. But so that kind of things, probably the individual country should think about it. But probably anyway, data or such kind of very important fact should necessary to think about the future. So may I shift to the next question? It's very interesting. By focusing it's Vincent of EU Metasat, by focusing on indicator and report, aren't we missing the bigger picture of using Earth observation for implementing the SDG? Probably, for example, best practice of decision making or so. Is there any comment on that? That's a very big question. Please.
My experience is that if you want to provide something really useful to decision makers, you should not only use remote sensing. Use remote sensing, geospatial information, and statistical information together. In that case, you can really provide some evidence-based results. Thank you.
Okay, please.
So absolutely, as I mentioned, it's really EO is a means to an ends, and so I think we have to visualize and be able to present the results of our data sets in a way that decision makers can understand and they can implement. And by having that in a spatial, a geo-referenced point of view, I think gives people the ability to validate and help use in situ data as a mechanism to further the policy agenda.
If you have it, please.
Yes, only to add a comment, because I think that I don't have much time. My experience shows that we need to pray for non-converted people. Okay, data is not only to be used for people that know how to manage this, even for policymakers. Okay, the case that I tried to illustrate, it was so fast here in consider agriculture. You have the traditional approach in Brazil the last 25 years of consider deforestation and land use. And we need to shift from low carbon agriculture and biodiverse conservation. We need to go into the agriculture sector, develop data and technologies that policymakers can understand, and convince the guys to change. It's like you need to go into the box. Okay, it's not out of the box. Out of the box, we are. We are looking around, you see the problem, but you need to go into the constituents and make sense, not only to manage better land use, but economically and socially. And this is what is so important if you want to influence the decision process, if you want to convince the guys that they need to play in the new direction in a short-term perspective. It's not long-term perspective. You need to address the problems now, not to postpone solutions. So it's that I used to adopt this expression, you need to pray for non-converted people. Data, geo data and information must be used to convince people to change faster, not as fast as possible, faster as faster.
Thank you. So I would like to, digest a little bit more, but I find two questions quite similar each other. So first one is that which strategy do you have to harmonize and integrate the many emerging platforms in Earth observation for SDGs, like ISDR, FIS for SDGs, etc., DataCube, etc. And the other one is that, this one. When engaging with countries on the use of Earth observation, how do you ensure not to duplicate effort, for example, among the different GEO initiative or UN USA, UN OSAT? So, yes, somebody think that we'll have so many platforms, schemes there. So how do we harmonize it? So probably, we ask Chu-san about that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's a very natural question because there are so many platforms, and then just collect, reported. Now they have a very successful SDG data hubs. And also we have another private sector hub like Google Earth engines. So I think it's difficult to harmonize them all. And then this is an early stage of platform being popping up, and then we are trying to use. And then I think they should be used like talking with each other and then exchanging data among them. And so I think gradually, I think we hope that the platform become harmonized and then come into optimum configurations. Thank you.
Everybody agree on that? If you have something, please.
On duplication of efforts, I think communication is absolutely critical at the national level and at the subnational level. For these ministries to talk with each other, to know what they're doing, that's the first step to prevent duplication.
Yes, you have it. And I think first time it's necessary to have a lot of effort from a lot of aspects. But the important point is that to respect each other from the individual platforms, and probably what is the extreme goal is important. If you share the same goal, probably you can, as Chusan advised, naturally integrate or join. And because probably resources are limited, human resources as well as monetary resources are limited, and the time is also always limited. So final moment, I would like to ask one each panelist, one individual panelist to, as I announced that what is most important to you? On one word, one phrase, one fact, may I ask? Please, starting from Chu-san.
Okay, thank you very much. But Otake-san already, told me that I don't ask for money, but I may say the same thing. But I think we need is a clear high priority in government policy and also government process. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, in the matters of time, I would just say that, capacity building and knowledge sharing among GEO members is crucial for enhancing the monitoring of SDGs. Thank you.
So?
We need a passionate commitment to a shared vision.
John?
Yeah, I think we need to promote good practice with interplenary cooperation. Thank you.
So Isabella?
Bring solution in the real world and make the world better.
So, thank you very much for panelists. And I have so many good questions here, but fortunately, time is lacking. So, I'd like to just pass the floor to the Stephen Ramesh regarding the summary of the session and also the recommendation for the future. Please.
Thank you. First of all, a big round of applause, please, to our panels. So I won't keep you very long because I know you're waiting on lunch. What we did during the presentations was we just created a short summary of the key outcomes. So I'm not going to read them verbatim, but these are just things for you to think about. There are a lot more questions on Slido as well that you can go and discuss with the panelists. So the first point, a good way to get involved in GEO in the SDG process is through the work programme and EO for SDG. There's more work to be done across the work programme to help provide this evidence-based decision-making and also addressing the data needs, so what Greg talked about in terms of reporting on outcomes. The digital transformation aspect is something that's happening all the time. One example is the work that's been done on data cubes. So as Paloma showed, Mexico, this is advancing very quickly. There are many other opportunities around the work of the Open Data Cube. As Sasha said, There are many, many countries who are now considering the use of Earth observations for their SDG work, which is massively encouraging, I think, for not just for GEO, but for UNCCD as well. And then the final point, oh, hello. The final point is this, I guess it's similar to what people have been saying about knowledge transfer, capacity building, and working across different organisations. So being able to integrate the different types of data is important, but also working more closely across the different organisations to do that knowledge building and capacity development. So lunch is outside, just at Sakura, that door over there, to your right and down the stairs. If you could be back in here for 2 o'clock, we will start the next session on time because this session started 10 minutes late.
Yes, I thank you very much indeed for the keynotes and the panelists. Secretariat led by Professor Gilberto Cabala and Japanese host, especially Doctors Stephen Ramage, Patricia Geddes, and Paula de Sarov. They made a great effort to make this session possible. So join me to hand to these people. Thank you very much.
Arigato.
And Stephen, can you show the result of the poll briefly? Okay. 10 to 10 minutes. Oh, okay. And then thank you very much for contributing to the poll. And then we'd like to show the result. If you come to 10 to 2.
So
thank you very much.
If anyone wants to see the results of the poll, we're going to show them at 10 minutes to 2 back in here.